So, welcome to the second revision tutorial looking at parts of the respiratory system. Specifically in this tutorial, we're going to be looking at and reviewing the structure and the function of the alveoli in the lungs. So, I've got a typical diagram here that we're going to work through explaining what the alveoli does, where it is, and how it works. But the key thing to remember, obviously, is the overarching purpose of the alveoli in the lungs, and that is that they are the site of gas exchange during breathing. So that's the overarching purpose, the site of gas exchange, and the gases that we are referring to are oxygen and carbon dioxide. So the site of gas exchange during breathing. Now, there are many alveoli found within the lungs, okay, at the end of each of the bronchioles, and they are small air sacs, for want of a better word, that expand and contract when you and me go through the process of breathing. And as part of that expansion and that contraction, they allow for carbon dioxide to be removed from the blood into the air sacs and then expelled out of the lungs, out of the body, and also oxygen to be taken in from the air surrounding into the air sacs and then to move into the blood within within the body, and so it can be transported around the body for use during respiration. So what we have here is an example of one alveoli, so one air sac. And when we say there are many hundreds of thousands, millions of these within the lungs because they're so incredibly tiny. So we often might see this singularly referred to as alveolus. Now, they allow for, in terms of them being so vast in number and so small in size, a couple of obviously unique features that allow for the movement of oxygen and carbon dioxide in and out of them really well. Now remember, oxygen and carbon dioxide are gases, so they move in and out of the lungs and the blood by diffusion. Now, each alveolus is one cell thick. So as you can see here on the diagram, we've sort of drawn small little boxes to represent that their wall is one cell thick. Now, what this allows for is this allows for a short diffusion distance. So it means that carbon dioxide and the oxygen don't have very far to go to get from the lungs to the blood and from the blood to the lungs. So that's a feature that helps carbon dioxide and oxygen. Now, because they are like large air sacs and there are so many of them, the other thing to remember is that because they are so vast, and they're all inside both of the lungs, they give the lungs a large surface area. And if the lungs have got a large surface area, it means that more oxygen and more carbon dioxide can move in and out of the alveoli in the lungs to the blood and vice versa quickly. So it means that we've got more gas exchange that can occur. So we've got more gas exchange. Good, right. So, key thing, if we now think about where obviously the alveoli are next to and what they actually do. So alveoli are surrounded by blood capillaries. So they're surrounded by capillaries. And each alveoli is surrounded by lots of capillaries, so we're thinking really numerical scale here. And these obviously transport blood into the lungs and out of the lungs. So blood that is coming into the lungs is deoxygenated because it's coming from the heart to be replenished with oxygen to return to the heart in order for the blood to then be transported around the body. So it starts off arriving at the alveoli and it's deoxygenated. Okay, so as well as the alveoli only being one cell thick, the capillary itself can also have a gap or a lumen that is one cell wide. And again, what this allows for is a short diffusion distance between blood and the lungs. So that means that the oxygen and carbon dioxide don't have as far to travel, so they can do it more quickly, and that gas exchange can occur more quickly. Okay, so it's one cell wide. Now, these blood cells they carry large quantities or high quantities of carbon dioxide. So a high concentration of CO2. Now, when they reach the alveoli itself, because they breathed in at this point, has low concentrations of CO2. So it means that the carbon dioxide can move out of the blood via diffusion across a really short diffusion distance into the alveoli in the lungs where there's a low concentration of CO2 by diffusion. So it moves by diffusion. And the same principle applies to where the lungs have brought in air from the external environment. It's got a larger quantity of oxygen in it than the blood has at this point because this is deoxygenated blood. So it means that the oxygen can also move by diffusion. So oxygen moves. Apologies. Oxygen moves from lungs to the blood by diffusion. Okay, good. Now, because you've got lots of capillaries surrounding all of the alveoli, and as we said, capillaries themselves are one cell wide, they're also one cell thick. And as we said, because there are lots of them surrounding the alveoli, they also have a large surface area. Which means that you can, again, because they've got short diffusion distance, you've got lots of surfaces through which oxygen and carbon dioxide can move, these help to increase the rate of diffusion. CO2 and oxygen. Good. And what's happening is the blood is continually being pumped through the capillaries, having this exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen, and then it's moving off away from the lungs, oxygenated, full of oxygen, and it's being carried back to the heart. So that can then be sent around the body and used for respiration. So this continual movement of blood allows for the oxygen concentration gradient to be maintained. So that's our final thing to bear in mind that about these features, the alveoli and the blood capillaries, is that the capillary blood movement allows the oxygen concentration gradient to be maintained. So there's always, when breathing in, so there's always, when breathing in, there's a higher concentration of oxygen in the alveoli than there is in the blood, so that the oxygen can move across the short diffusion distance from the lungs into the blood and be carried back to the heart. And when breathing out, there's always a higher concentration of carbon dioxide in the blood than there is in the alveoli at that point, so the carbon dioxide can move the other way and be expelled out of the alveoli and out of the lungs. Now remember that these air sacs, they expand and they contract when we inhale and exhale, and that's controlled by the diaphragm. So the alveoli expand and contract with diaphragm movement, because the lungs are either being filled with air and get bigger, or they're being forced to squash together and get smaller because the diaphragm's moving up. From our previous tutorial that we looked at on this. So they can expand and contract with diaphragm movement. Good. So there you've got a brief revision tutorial looking at the function of the alveoli being the site of gas exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the lungs during breathing and how they go about doing it. So thank you for watching the tutorial.